Alright guys, so let's go ahead and review our sine and cosine functions from Algebra 2 with trig. Our a in our functions here, always in front of sine or cosine attached to it or multiplied to it, that represents amplitude. Okay. And that tells you from a function's midline how far up or how far down it goes. So for example, let's say my midline was here. I'm just drawing you a generic sine or a cosine function. Okay, I know this looks terrible, but okay, so this is what it looks like, which means we're saying from the midline to the highest point, that is our A, and from midline to the lowest point, that's also our A. So that's what our A tells us. Our amplitude tells us how high up it goes from the midline and how low it goes from the midline, which should be the same. Now our P stands for period. Okay? Our period is how long it takes for one cycle to happen. So how long it takes for a cycle to happen. Okay, so how long it takes for a cycle to happen, that's our period. Now there's a formula for period, but before we get there, let's go and define our b in our function. Our b in our function tells us or helps us to find period. This helps us to find period. And the location of b would be right in front of theta, or theta can be exchanged with x, that means it's going to be right in front of x. Either way, it's going to be inside the function of cosine or sine. Now, I say that b helps us to find our period because we only have one formula that we have to remember. The formula for our period for sine and cosine functions is 2 pi over b. So if you do this operation, okay, period equals 2 pi over b, that gives us actual numeric value of our period. Now, you see the h here. Our h's inside the parentheses with our theta or our x. This moves the function. This tells you how your functions will translate from either left or right to left or right. So it moves left or right. Now, k, the outside numbers added or subtracted to, helps us to figure out whether the function moved up or down. And in our class, we're going to refer to k's as our midlines. So that's what it means. Now, the formal definition for our h would be a phase shift. And formal definition for our k would be vertical shift. Now we got these definitions and vocabs out the way. Let's go ahead and do some examples here. So I think we went over some of the easier examples on Friday. So let's take a look at our sine, and I think we only did sines on Friday. So let's say 2 sine of 2 pi. Now, one thing that you need to know about the sine function plus 3 2 pi x, okay, is that it looks somewhat like this. It looks like, as you can see on this graph, it starts on my midline. So if my midline, I'm gonna shift this up so you can see the midline better. So it starts on my midline. Do you see that little 2 starts on the midline? Even if I shifted, and even if I, either way, do y'all see how both of these functions are starting on my midline? Since my midline, as you can see, is at 2. So on my y-axis, on my midline, it starts on my midline. That's my midline. Are you okay with that? Just to graphic up, it starts on my midline. Sine functions as of right now, unless I translate it, it starts on the midline. Now let's keep going with this. So knowing that, I'm going to go ahead and define certain things. My amplitude on this function is 2 because of the number in front of that. My period will be found by doing 2 pi over b, and my b in this case was in front of x is 2 pi. So we'll work this out. So it's 2 pi over 2 pi, which is just 1. Same thing over same thing is just 1. And once I have the information, I'm going to go ahead and start sketching here. Let's draw my y-axis and my x-axis. So here, I know that my midline is given by the very last number, which is 3. So I'm going to indicate my tick marks. That's 3. So at 3, I'm going to indicate my midline with a dotted line. Okay, that looks about right. So first thing that I indicated was my midline. Once I indicate that, I'm going to go ahead and indicate my amplitude. By that means I'm going to mark on my graph how high this function should go or how low this function should go. So from 3, I can go up to, which is at 5. So that's as high as your function or your graph will go. And down to, which is at 1, and that's how low your function should go. Anything higher or lower cannot happen in this function. Okay? Now I'm going to mark my period. And here's something that we talked about, the period. Step number 3, mark the period. Within a period of a sine or cosine function, there are 4 parts to it. Okay, there are 4 parts where it's gonna go. Here's what I mean by 4 parts. So I need y'all to take a look at this with me. So this is what's happening. So from here to there, it's going up. So that's part 1. Going down part to the midline, that's part 2. All the way to here is part 3, part 4. So that 4 parts make a cycle, or in the other classes they called it 2 humps. So here's hump 1, hump 2. Then it makes a full cycle or full period. So within a period, you should have 4 different parts of sine or cosine functions, okay? So let's take a look at that. So since I know that within 4 parts, it's gonna within a period, it's going to have 4 parts. So I'm going to mark my actual period. My period was 1. But we just talked about how we're going to divide that into 4 parts. So that's step number 4, 4 parts. Okay. Now I divide them up graphically, but I'm also going to do that algebraically. So I'm going to divide 1 divided by 4. Which gives us 1 over 4. So my first tick mark is 1/4, second 2/4, third one 3/4, fourth one is 4/4, but we already have that. Now we are ready to graph. So here's where we're going to be. Sine function always starts on the midline of your y-axis as of right now. Because it's a positive sine x, it's going to start by going up first. So on my first tick mark, it's going to go up to the amplitude. Second tick mark, go down to the midline. Third tick mark, go down to the amplitude or the lowest point. And the fourth tick mark, come back to the midline. And once we have those tick marks ready, we're just going to connect those to make a sine function. And if I really wanted to, I can go back and forth over and over and over again. I think that's it for our lesson, and your homework was to work on the extra worksheet, which is on your Google Classroom folder, and it will look somewhat like this, and y'all were to work on number 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the first page.